Even though I am all decorated and ready for Christmas, the holiday season cannot officially begin until I wrap up all the books that I read in the month of November. Welcome to the booktube channel, Jack and the Book Stack, where I talk about a wide variety of book genres and the bookish lifestyle. This is my monthly ranking video. I'm going to be ranking all the books that I read in the month of November from my least favorite to my most favorite. I separate these into 3 categories: books that I disliked, liked, and loved, and of course I will leave chapters down below so you can jump around if you want. I will also link related reading vlogs down below in the description box so you can see more details about the plot and thorough analysis from Jack. I am completely shocked by the books that I read this month. Books that I expected to be all-time favorites ended up in the disliked category, or books that I really wasn't sure about ended up in the love category. It was just chaos and mayhem this month. I am so shocked and I'm so excited to go through this ranking with you right now. First up, the unranked category. I was not able to finish Ship of Destiny, which is book 3 in the Live Ship Traders trilogy. I was really hoping to knock out this series this month. If you watched my series reading vlog, you'll know that I didn't quite make it. I am on chapter 6, or page 116. I am enjoying it, so I will be finishing it, hopefully in December, so I can close out in 2023. I didn't have time. I didn't want to push it because this is one that I think needs to be savored. So I am going to continue to savor it and read it throughout the month of December. Kicking things off in the dislike category. And dislike might be too mild of a term for how much I hated the reading experience of these books. It's really, really strong. But they are not bad books. Okay, maybe except for one. One might be borderline, like bad. But a lot of these are just my opinion. It's very subjective. There were things that I, as a reader, don't enjoy, but I can see why other people would like them. So hear me out. Even if you typically skip like most hated books type things because they're too negative, I'm going to tell you why, so you can decide if this is a book for you. The book that I disliked the most in the month of November, I actually hated reading this, really shocks me. This is what I mean when I say I was shocked by the results this month, because so many other booktubers that I adore and respect and share taste with ranked this as one of their best reads of the year. They rated it 5 stars, and I actively hated it. The book is Slewfoot by Bram. I've read another book by Bram. I read Krampus, and I think I ranked it 5 stars. I loved that horror book. So this is not a problem for me with the author or his writing or the style of horror that he writes. I hate false accusations, and this has elements of the witch trials, like the Salem witch trials, which is historical false accusations. This actually happened. So that's not something I enjoy at all, and so that's what made this really difficult for me to read. I didn't enjoy it. I actually mentioned that I hate false accusations in my video I did, 20 things I hate in books. And I should have guessed that was going to be an element because it says A Tale of Bewitchery, and it is set in colonial New England, and it says this is a battle between pagan and Puritan. So like, you can kind of assume there was going to be witch trials, but I was influenced because everybody was loving this so much, so I wanted to keep an open mind and try it. So, you know, all of that was up front for me. I should have known that this wasn't going to be a book for me, so it's not really fair to say it's a bad book because I'm just not the target audience for it, since I know I don't enjoy that storyline or that trope or that element. There were some great things in this book. I liked the depiction of the devil in this. That was really cool and actually kind of a fun, charming character. And there were elements of a very violent vengeance that was so satisfying and good. I didn't even tell you what this is about yet. I was just saying what I disliked about it. But we follow a main character who is in this community. She's not from there, so she's trying to learn about it and adjust. And she is trying to hold on to her husband's farm. So women don't really have rights. They're not independent. They are not expected to do much. But she really wants to hold on to this farm so it doesn't get taken away. She doesn't want to be, you know, not sold into slavery, but her only other option if she loses this land is to be a servant. And be in debt, and she doesn't want to work her life away like that. So she really wants to hold on to this land. And there is a villain in this book that is just so despicable. He was so frustrated, a very great villain, because you hate him like with all your soul. So that was very well done. As you can see, there's a lot that an audience could enjoy in this book. It just wasn't for me. I didn't enjoy the reading experience. It was my least favorite of the month. The next book on my disliked list, one step above that, is Unwell Women. I read this on my Kindle. I checked it out through Libby. And I read this because I wanted to learn more about misdiagnosis in women, particularly versus men, how the medical industry treats them, I guess is the best, or looks at them. This is a topic that became interesting to me because earlier this year my mom had a heart attack, and I learned so much. For example, heart attacks present themselves differently in women than they do in men. I had no idea. I think about in movies when someone has a heart attack, it's like the pain in the left arm and they're clutching their chest and they fall down. It's very dramatic. And that can be true for men, but for women, they don't always feel like chest pain, which is wild to me. And so often, like, women go, first of all, they don't go to the hospital because they don't know they're having a heart attack. But when they do, like if they go to urgent care, oftentimes they're sent home because it's like, oh, it's just anxiety or whatnot. And so just that opened my mind to this whole topic. I wanted to learn more about it. And I did not read the description of this book before I went into it. This really focused on the history of women's medicine. And it didn't get to present day until well after like 75% of the book. It focused on like the hysteria of women, like, oh, she's just hysterical, you know, just dismiss her. And oh, she's feeling pain. Well, the solution is for her to get married and have babies. Like, that's what will make her feel better. And it was interesting. Sure, it's just not what I was looking for. And I was so painfully bored. But again, that's a me problem because the description on Goodreads tells you that it focuses on the history of medicine, right? I just didn't read it beforehand. So this book has an audience. It just wasn't me. The last book in the disliked category is the one where I am kind of borderline thinking, I don't know if I can say this is a good book, wrong audience type thing. I read Iron Flame for my dragon reading vlog, and this almost made me embarrassed that I liked the first book so much. The first book I rated 4 stars. This one was a 2, a generous 2. It was so immature. I mean, our main character, Violet, is like 20 years old, 21, I think. And she was acting like she was 15 with like how emotional she was. She had uncontrollable jealousy, unfair expectations of Xaden to just give her the truth and all information on everything, even though he explained to her why that wasn't a very strategic, good move. And she was just being a little crybaby about it, didn't want to let it go. We focused on the same argument this whole time. And because she was making such poor decisions and not communicating, being jealous, being overly emotional, being reckless, Xaden became overprotective and suffocating almost. Whereas in book 1, he was very supportive of her, like, hey, go be a badass and I trust you to take care of yourself, and, you know, I don't need to stand up for you because you can stand up for yourself. And I loved that. And this one was just so immature. So I didn't enjoy the romance. I also did not enjoy the plot. I felt like it really dragged on, and I wasn't really engaged in the macro plot because these little challenges Violet overcame, and they didn't seem to contribute at all to the larger plot. So like, I'm like, okay, that's it. Like, I don't feel like I need to pick the book back up. It was a chore to get through this book. So that's why I say, like, I guess I see why people like it because the dragons are really, really cool. And like the ending was good. I liked the family relationships in it. But I don't know if I could say this is a good book. I don't know what you guys think. If you're Fourth Wing fans, I don't know how you felt about the sequel. It was not for me. I did not like it. Let's move on to more positive topics though, and we are in the liked category. So the book that I read in November that I liked the least, but I still liked it, was A Natural History of Dragons. I checked out this audiobook on Libby, and again, I read this for my dragon reading vlog. And this one I picked up because I like the Veronica Speedwell series, the Victorian England kind of setting, the woman who is very science-minded, that is very independent and intelligent, and kind of bucks tradition and cultural expectations. So that's why I picked up Natural History of Dragons, and it delivered absolutely on all those fronts. It didn't deliver the dragons as much as I would have liked. They're more like wild animals that our main character is trying to study. And I hear that dragons become more like prevalent later in the series, but I don't think I'm going to continue the series just because this one was meh for me. I enjoyed our main character who wants to study these dragons. She's expected to get married though. That's what all women are good for, right? In this era. And so she finds a really kind man. They have a very pure romance and relationship that I enjoy. He's actually supportive of her. He is also science-minded, which is really neat. And they go on this adventure to see why dragons have started attacking people more frequently. Something has changed in their behavior, so they go and study them. I kind of liked the science element of the dragons, trying to study them and learn more about them was kind of neat. But I just prefer my dragons to have a little bit more personality and be more like characters. So this was interesting. It definitely has an audience because it's fantasy and that there's, these giant flying reptiles that breathe fire. But more like historical and like science-y rather than like fantasy. Like nobody's riding the dragons in this book or talking to them or getting powers from their dragons. So if you're not necessarily a fantasy reader, this could be a good choice for you because it was still kind of interesting. Next up, I listened to the audiobook for Bookshops and Bone Dust. This is the new released prequel to Legends and Lattes, which is marketed as a very cozy fantasy with low stakes. Now, this did capture some of the things that I liked from Legends and Lattes, but it didn't quite hit the mark in giving me the same feelings. So it did have an element of like building up a small business, and instead of a coffee shop, like in the first book, this one is a bookshop, which is really cool. And I think it knows its target audience are like book lovers. So when they're talking about reading books and enjoying books and the magic of reading, like that resonated with me. It's very charming and I loved it. I loved the different marketing ideas they had to make the bookshop more successful. So that was kind of neat. And then the overall plot with like the conflict was okay, I guess. This one kind of lacked for me with like the found family type vibes. It didn't give me the same cozy, warm feeling. I didn't connect with these characters as much. And maybe because it's a prequel, and it's different characters. The main character, Viv, is the same, but everybody else is different. So it's like, that something's going to happen. Like Viv's not going to stay with these characters. They're not going to be a found family for long because we know from book one, like she's opening her coffee shop. Totally different cast of characters. The next book that I liked in November was Spy the Lie. I read this for my nonfiction reading vlog. I checked it out from Kindle Unlimited, and it was very insightful and interesting how to detect when someone is not being truthful. And it was good because it talks about you need to consider lots of different factors rather than just one or two, because one or two can be explained away, but usually like a group of these tells are like how you can determine if someone's lying to you. And it not only gave examples from like criminal interrogations, because this is written supposedly by like CIA agents, but it gave you like real life examples, like how to question your kids on something, how to confront a partner about possible infidelity, how to interview a potential caretaker for your children. All these relevant things that we can apply to our own lives, I thought was very interesting. I don't know if I can detect if someone is lying. It was very complex. It makes me more nervous about, like, gosh, is someone gonna think I'm lying because I'm crossing my arms, or I'm like fidgeting, or I'm like looking around? Like, are they gonna think I'm lying? Is this gonna be a false accusation? Like, what am I doing? It made me more paranoid than anything. But it was really interesting. I like human psychology and why we do the things we do. So this kind of leaned into that a little bit. So I enjoyed this read. The next book that I liked in November is actually two books. I read this for my vlog where I was trying to catch up on book series that I'm in progress reading. So I read the Veronica Speedwell books, An Impossible Imposter and A Sinister Revenge. I got that audiobook on Libby. I haven't purchased it yet. I'm waiting for the hardcover price to come down just a little bit more because it's a newer release. I love this series. I think we're at book 8 now, and I've read them all this year. I really like this Victorian setting. I mentioned this is the series that inspired me to pick up Natural History of Dragons. It's already mentioned what I love about it, the Victorian setting. I love the female main character who's science-minded. This adds another element of a romance, and I love Veronica and Stoker. I love their banter. I love how they just understand each other, how they interact. These two books frustrated me a little bit. That's why they're in the liked category when these books are normally in the loved category, because we're kind of having the same insecurities with Veronica repeated over and over, and I want their relationship to evolve a little bit more. I don't like that in this one she was keeping a secret from Stoker. I don't like secrets or miscommunication tropes in romance, so this one was pushing it for me. And then in A Sinister Revenge, it was that insecurity, like she's being stubborn and like Stoker's the king, right? He is just the cream of the crop, awesome guy, super understanding, but he also sets boundaries like, hey, I need XYZ from you and I deserve XYZ, so you need to give it to me. And I'm gonna, pull back until you can figure it out. And I love him for that, but she is just being stubborn. So I'm hoping they can pull through on this. But this mystery series has been very enjoyable. In this one, we're investigating a reappearance of an heir to a noble family. Everyone presumed he was dead, and now he reappears. And so it's like, is he really who he says he is? Is he here to just con the family and get the inheritance? Like, what's the deal? And then in A Sinister Revenge, Stoker's brother asks him and Veronica to come help him confront some people that he thinks are out to get him. And chaos ensues. It's a fun, isolated setting, closed circle mystery, which is my favorite. So enjoyable reads that I liked in November. The book that I liked more than that in November was The Mad Ship. This is book 2 in the Live Ship Traders trilogy. This is the book that I DNF'd in June because it was not the right time for me to be reading it. I am really trying to finish this trilogy this month. So this was also part of my vlog, trying to finish series. And I'm so glad that I put this down, that I recognized it wasn't a bad book, it was just the wrong time, that I could be the right audience for it, it was just a timing issue. Picked it back up, enjoyed it a lot more. I think one of my frustrations is a character POV we have from a 13-year-old girl named Malta. Super bratty, and oh my god, she drives me nuts. Cannot stand her. Just so superficial and whiny and bratty and thinks she's right about everything. Just don't enjoy her. So glad that I gave this a chance and kept reading, because like 50% into this one and she really changed in my eyes. She became a lot more strategic, a point of view that I'm enjoying a lot more. I think she's getting some perspective as well. So I'm enjoying that. I'm glad I stuck with it. Now for the book, or should I say books, that I enjoyed the most in November, and that is the Aurelian Cycle trilogy. Now this one starts with Fireborne. I read this for my dragon reading vlog, and then it goes to Flamefall and Fury Song, which I read for my finishing series vlog. This is a YA fantasy series with dragons. This one takes place in a military school setting. We start off with 2 POVs, Annie and Lee. Annie is 16 years old. I think Lee is another year or so older than her. They both knew each other from an orphanage. They were both kids of a revolution, although different sides of the revolution. And okay, this was interesting. I think if you don't like YA fantasy, you should still give this a shot. Because if you could just ignore the fact that they're teenagers, like take that out. Pretend this military school is like medical school, like postgraduate work. I think that makes a lot more sense. This is a very highly political series with, I think, our deeper themes. So elements of history repeating itself, and everyone is a villain. It just depends on your perspective, and government not looking out for their people, or more specifically, only looking out for some people. To me, it felt like these characters were a lot older than 16. That I would think. I would think, like, if I compare these Annie, let's say Annie in this book, compare her to Violet from this one, who's like 20 or 21, Homegirl is way, way more mature. And we see this in their relationship too, because Annie and Lee are love interests. And just the way that they just have faith in each other to do the right thing. And sometimes they question, there's a little bit of doubt sometimes which side the other one is on. Like Annie might be like, is Lee going to the other side? Are we still on the same team? What's going on here? Ultimately, they still have faith in each other. There's no jealousy. There's kind of like, hey, whatever makes them happy kind of a vibe. So I enjoyed the romance subplot in this. The dragons were really cool, kind of had personality of like puppy dogs, like characteristics of a dog, which were kind of fun. So I really enjoyed this. It's in the liked category though, because how it ended, I felt, I mean, it was satisfying, but I felt kind of like somber and like down. I don't really expect everybody to live. I'm not saying like it has to be like all wrapped up in a pretty Disney bow, but I still just felt kind of down. So maybe it wasn't as satisfying as I thought. Like the plot wrapped up, but there was just something about it that just didn't leave me feeling good, but still very good, and I would recommend this trilogy. Now it's time for the books that I loved in the month of November, and this is where some more surprises come in, more shocking results, at least for me. The book that I loved the least in November was Thinking Fast and Slow. This is a nonfiction book that I read for, you guessed it, my nonfiction reading vlog. I picked this one because it has been on my Goodreads TBR the longest, so I had to knock this off, and it was so interesting. This is about the hidden forces that shape our decisions, like unconscious biases that we may not realize we have, but we do. And it was so funny because I was filming my review of this book and I had highlighted so many quotes, and I filmed myself reading all the quotes that I wanted to share with you guys, and the video was like an hour long. So I had to cut out some of the quotes. There's some other books in this pile that were like that too, but I had so much to say. This would be a great book for annotating because there's things that are relevant to I think your experiences of other people, but also you can recognize some of these things in yourself. And it was like every single page there was something that was relevant in some form. And so I really enjoyed this. It is kind of science heavy in the terms of like it talks about studies, like studies that were conducted, but it's very approachable in that you can follow along. Like we're not using sciencey terms really. It's just maybe data heavy is more accurate of a description, talking about, you know, the style of this book. It was accessible. It's just a lot. So I would recommend physically reading it and maybe annotating it. So then you can always come back and read your annotations at a later time. The next book that I loved in November was Will My Cat Eat My Eyeballs? And Other Questions About Dead Bodies. This was delightfully morbid, but still very uplifting. So the author says in her intro that this is based on questions that she receives from children as an undertaker? What's the correct term here? Yeah, she owns like a mortuary or something. So she hangs out with corpses all day, every day. They don't really disturb her. And she says that kids, they don't really have a sense of like what's socially acceptable to ask. They don't have a sense of like, oh my gosh, that's too morbid. How can you possibly ask that? They just ask really honest questions, and the answers have really interesting facts and data about it. So I enjoyed this. A lot of the questions I never would have thought of before, but I liked the science behind it. And although the questions are asked by children, at times I felt like it was almost written for children because it was very basic level explanations. And sometimes she kind of goes off on a tangent a little bit, like she's trying to be like witty and funny. And it was bugging me at times. I'm like, can we get back to the facts and the science here rather than, you know, trying to be cutesy? But interesting questions like, will my hair keep growing in my coffin after I'm buried? Can I use human bones from a cremation as jewelry? Why don't bugs eat people's bones? Can I be buried in the same grave as my hamster? Did mummies stink when they were wrapped? We eat dead chickens. Why not dead people? ew, gross. I don't want to think about that one. But just some cute, fun things. This was a short read. I definitely recommend it. I didn't really think this was an area of interest for me. I was just looking for something kind of shocking and, like I said, morbidly cute, and this delivered. I have 3 books left in the loved category. 3 books left in this ranking for November. And this was really tough to pick a favorite because I enjoyed these 3 so much, and more importantly, they've stuck with me throughout the month. Throughout all of these other reads, these 3 have stuck with me, and I also find myself talking about them a lot. This next book I read for my nonfiction reading vlog, and this is another surprise to me. The book is Laziness Does Not Exist. I listened to this audiobook from Libby, and this one shocked me because I heard about this on the booktube channel Emily Fox, and she described it as, I think she mentioned it was a self-help book, and that's not something I gravitate towards in my nonfiction at all. Like, that is not my thing. But the topic really interested me because this whole hustle culture, I think, is something that is very toxic and overdone and exploited. And so I wanted to read more about it, I guess. So I was kind of like on the fence with this one. So I'm shocked that I loved it. And I'm talking about it to so many people, particularly people at work that feel burnt out. I'm like, gosh, you have to read this book. You have to read this. So it's not all like self-helpy about like setting boundaries and, you know, not working too much overtime. Like, it was good. I feel like a lot of self-help comes from a place of privilege, and it could be very condescending, and I did not get that vibe from this book at all. It gave a lot of great studies, a lot of great perspectives. I really, really enjoyed this book. I think I want to buy it because I want to reread it and annotate it, and there's so many people that I want to lend this book to because I think they can get so much from it. And, you know, you only have one life, so why spend it, you know, super busy all the time? Laziness does not exist. We have to allow ourselves to slow down, and this whole perception that, like, if you're not always producing, if you're not doing something, that you're lazy is just silly. When it comes to all the books that I've read in November, I've really been stressing myself out trying to pick a favorite, and I figure, who cares? It's my booktube channel. I can do what I want. And what I want this month is to consider it a tie. So my favorite books that I read this month are Invisible Women and Warbreaker. Let's talk about Invisible Women first. I read this for my nonfiction reading vlog this month, and this is another one that I had so many quotes and stats underlined to read to you guys when I was summarizing this book and giving my reaction, and the vlog was an hour long, so I had to like cut it down, and it killed me inside. But this is one that I have also been quoting to everyone in my life. I was at the Thanksgiving table talking about this, and all the things that I learned that just blew my mind. I cannot believe some of these gaps in our data exist. I can't believe that we use crash test dummies that resemble the male bodies. We don't even consider that seatbelts aren't built for women, and these things we have on our chest. So women are more likely to be injured and die in car accidents because they use male resembling car crash dummies. I can't believe that single women recover from heart attacks faster and better than married women or women that cohabitate with a man, because cohabitating with a man results in so much extra work for a woman, regardless of her employment status, even if they have like equal jobs. I can't believe the data bias when it comes to African American women and health. I had no idea that there was such a discrepancy with particularly pregnant African American women and how they're treated, their mortality rates, how they're just expected to have a different pain tolerance, everything around medical, how we test drugs on men only because they just assume women are too complicated with their cycles and various hormones, so they're like left out of studies. So then either the drugs tested only work for men, or they're discredited because they don't work for men, but they could work for women. Like, all this stuff just blows my mind. I learned so much in this book. It should be required reading in schools. I'm telling everyone about it. If I could get everyone I know a Christmas present this year in book form, it would be this book, because it is just so groundbreaking. It really, really opened my mind, and I want to read so much more. I want to learn more about the topics discussed in this. Now for my other favorite read of the month, Warbreaker by Sanderson. And you know what's so funny is I was looking at my favorite books from the other months this year in 2023, and like every single month I read a Brandon Sanderson book, it was my number one of the month. Like, I didn't mean for that. I didn't mean to become a super fan, but here we are. And this one, I was thinking about why that is, and I think this is because this is the perfect fantasy for me. First of all, it's a standalone, and there is a sequel coming sometime in the future, but you can read this as a standalone. It is its own complete story, and you can see how it will go off like in the future with like subplots, but it is very contained. So I love that it's a standalone. I love the complexity of the magic. I love the complexity of the plot. But more importantly, I love the characters in this. I love their own unique personalities, and I like how some of them are very severe. I think there's kind of high stakes in this, but there's also a lot of humor and sarcasm, and I just love that so much. I like that kind of lightness in the fantasy, and it doesn't mean that it's cozy. It doesn't mean that it's not high stakes. It just, I like the characters that have a sense of humor. And I guess it could be kind of frustrating if you're not in the mood for it. That's what I've often said with Brandon Sanderson and his sense of humor. Like, if I was in a cranky mood, he might get on my nerves with some of his humor. But this just really worked for me. If you don't know what this is about, we have two sisters, and they always knew that, you know, their kingdom had to give a princess to another kingdom in this, according to this treaty, like had to give a princess to be married to their god king. And so, you know, one of them goes off and is married to this god king who is supposedly, you know, very violent, very unforgiving, short temper, but, you know, good father, right? Giving off his daughters. So we have these two women, and I'm interested about this because it's a man writing these two women and their perspectives, and I'm not bothered by it. I'm not bothered by it. I think they're powerful women, they're intelligent women, they're kind women. I like their journey and how their arc and how they grow. Both of them have an amazing journey. I like that. I also love the character in this book that is a sword. Like, I love that an inanimate object has a personality and can talk and is so witty and funny and has no concept of humanity, and so their commentary is very entertaining and amusing. Another character I loved in this was Lightsong, who is one of the gods, and he is one of the sarcastic ones I'm talking about, where like he doesn't want to do his godly duties. He's like, just tell them I'm hungover, I'm still in bed. And they're like, sir, you can't get hangovers, you're a god. Well, tell them I'm sick. You can't get sick either. Nobody's gonna believe you. And he was just so charming and funny. I really enjoyed him. This is Jack's kind of fantasy. I really, really loved this. And those are the surprises in my November reads. Books that I really, really thought I would love ended up being in the disliked category. A ton of nonfiction in my loved category, which I was not expecting at all. So I'm so glad that I kept an open mind for these books. And that's why I always say that I love reading a wide variety of genres, because there's often a lot of surprises in there. So thank you so much for hanging out with me in this video, and I will see you in the next one.